All right, everybody. I've got a returning, very special guest. Everybody, welcome back to the show, Trevor Fernandes-Lenkiewicz. Welcome back, Trevor.
Oh, dude, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you got a hold of me and we were able to do this again. It's been too long.
I know. Honestly, I feel like it honestly feels like a lifetime ago, which is crazy because it was what, a year and a half?
Roughly, yeah. Because it was sometime after MegaCon, and I didn't go this year. So, yeah, year and
Dude.
a half. Yeah, you were launching Minutes to Midnight back then, which I got and I really enjoyed.
Oh, cool.
Um, and then we missed out on getting you on for Rise #1, but
Mhm.
here you are for Rise #2.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, at least we got to go into this and I mean, what better time than the present, you know?
Exactly. I I kind of want to jump in the deep end with this. I know in the past we've talked and gotten more in depth on stuff, and we will. But I really want to get on this because I was shocked when you announced Rise.
Me too.
Because, and just to be blunt, superhero comics don't do well in crowdfunding.
hmm
And it's both surprising to me because I feel like if you're a comics fan, there's like probably a 75% chance you're a superhero fan.
hmm
Um, but the Kickstarter community seems to want something different. So what went into the thought process of like I'm going to do a superhero book?
It was really necessitated by the story I wanted to tell. Like I'm usually very theme centric as a writer. And I thought about what the best way to explore the theme of like performative masculinity and this idea of being enough as a man. And it's like, I mean, the pedestal of being like the Superman, right? This physically um, highly proven person who has the responsibility of the world on his shoulders is a lot to bear, And apropos of my usual shtick, I got to employ some level of like pseudoscience in the mix to explain why it happens, and that correlates with the theme, right? Like this character, his powers scale with the amount of free dopamine in his system, and that obviously has a lot of psychological and physical implications. But I'm really bad about thinking about the market viability of a project before I launch it. It's really like, I have a story I want to tell. How can I best tell that story? Okay, got it. Like, let's get it done. The thing that I really wanted to set out to do was to not necessarily break away from the superhero genre, but say something different with it, right? Like, we're not trying to be controversial or try to flood the room with shock value. But we are trying to take what works about superhero books and point that in another direction. And so I think that this book, above all, is very concerned about the emotional and psychological intimacy, and sort of how that would affect somebody in that position, especially being that this is the only superhero that exists in this universe. Like, I'm not building some massive pantheon of my own Justice League or my own Avengers. I'm not really interested in that. What I'm interested in is telling the story about this guy. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it is kind of a boring answer insofar as like I had no statistics, I had no numbers to back up the decision. It was purely, this is the story I want to tell, and I want to tell it now. So here we are with a book that don't think, I mean, I did not think I was going to be doing superheroes anytime soon. And I feel like my body of work leading up to Rise even spoke to that as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you started off with Area 51, you did the anthology Minutes to Midnight, and then presumably it seems like you're doing more with Minutes to Midnight, but we can get into that later.
Mm-hmm.
To do Rise, I think as somebody who, I mean, there's a giant Marvel flag behind me. As somebody who loves superhero stuff, I find more and more that like the like independent superhero stuff tends to not hit as well, and I feel like it's because we keep saying the same thing over and over again about superheroes.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that when I saw your project and I saw what you were doing, I was like, it felt like you were trying something different, which I respect. And I also respect that fuck the statistics. If I wanted to make money, I'd probably be making not safe for work books. Um, and let's just tell a story and see if people can get attached to it. And it seems like people did, because the first campaign did pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the decision making that went into this was very pure, and I don't know. I wanted to really find the core of like what makes a man feel strong as opposed to enacting his will over other people. Like I spent like my early adulthood in the middle of a pandemic. You know what I mean? Like that thing hit when I was 22, going on 23, So, and I also grew up without like a proper father figure. So having to navigate myself and like this idea of who I wanted to be as a grown man was very difficult, being in that position. And that sort of reflected in telling this story. And I generally agree. I think it's really tough to nail indie superheroes in general because we don't have that legacy of iconicity in history and the mythology behind it. So you do have to start from scratch. And then I would say 9 out of 10 times people that do try to take that next step end up making a cheaper version of something that already existed. And so it was very, very important for me when we were developing the story and developing this character that there were certain visual cues that were reminiscent of icons like Superman, that this character as a person was nothing like him. And again, it wasn't for, it wasn't to be controversial. It was because I wanted to explore something different and kind of play with the tropes and the trappings of the genre in a way that re-outfits them as opposed to dismantles them.
Yeah. I like one of the things that like I really enjoy talking about outside of comics and try to express it a lot, because I've had my own battles with mental health and all these other things, is the idea of masculinity and what it means today, and how to navigate that, and how men's mental health doesn't really get talked about a whole lot. You're seeing it more and more now. Some people I don't really wish weren't on my side, but you know. And when I saw like you were attacking some of these things, it felt very personal to me, feeling that while we've had very different upbringings and different experiences in life, I feel like we've come to similar places in growing up. Maybe for me, it took a little bit longer. I was into my 30s before I started exploring these things, but yeah, so that was always attractive to me about the book personally. Do you dive deeper into like how it affects the main character's mental health and maybe like deal with things like anxiety, depression, anything like that in the book?
For sure. Yeah, we definitely get into the weight of the responsibility, right? Like this idea that I think as men, we're told from a young age that our value is in pretty much what we can provide for other people. You are the quote unquote breadwinner. You are the strength of the family. You're supposed to be solid and strong and unemotional, but also caring and loving. And you have to do all of these things for other people. And you don't really have the time to figure out how those things correlate with who you are as an individual. And I think that's really interesting. You put this person on a pedestal, and especially whose powers are corollary to how he's feeling, right? That creates a lot of trouble. And it also questions like what type of behaviors are going to be promoted by his biology and therefore his psychology, that could make things even harder on himself. And how does he deal with that? Like a lot of this story also deals with guilt, and it deals with kind of the importance of finding that counterbalance in your life. It's like, as much as this story is like heavily weighted on masculinity, A crucial element is also about the balancing effect that having, I think, a well-natured feminine element in your life helps to structure a man. Like I think that's equally important. I mean, if you've read issue 1, like a big part of what makes John do the right thing is his relationship with a supporting character. And a lot of his strength comes from not necessarily the physical sexual intimacy that he has with her, but there is an emotional linkage that makes him feel stronger, that makes him feel better, and it makes him want to be better, which is a major driving force for this entire series. So I'm trying to play with these things from a couple of different angles because it's such a complicated topic, and there are so many different ideas on like masculinity, both from various subsects of the male community, the female community, so on and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, we're really trying to poke at a couple of kind of sensitive topics, but I think they're relevant, and we're also at the same time not pointing any fingers at anybody. It's like this is what it is for a reason, and there's a context behind that. How do we even begin to approach finding not just comfort in ourselves, but finding strength in it as well?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's important people to know out there that there isn't just one version of masculinity. There's many different people, different men who have their own form of masculinity. So you're obviously talking about it from your point of view here.
Mm.
Did when it came out, when you first started talking about this book, and even to now, when like people have started to get the digital copies in their hands, I know as we're discussing it, physical copies of issue 1 should be out soon.
Next week.
Um, did you get any like flack back from it? Anybody who was like upset or mad about the conversations you were having in the book?
Not yet, but I think that's also partly because we haven't gotten into the meat of it yet. I
Mhm.
think if anything, issue 2 might be a little bit harder for people to swallow because it does dive into some of these themes in a little bit more raw of an approach. Like this first book does a lot of setup, and the second book starts a little bit of that follow through in a very unapologetic way. And so, yeah, I think next issue and the issue after that might be the ones where people want to put me on a cross. But so far, issue 1, the reception's been really good, and people seem to appreciate that it's a different approach, and that we're dealing with a superhero who tries to imbue like a sense of heart and practicality in what he does. So not yet, but big underline on the yet.
Yeah. It's, I see it as I hear you talk about it, and just so everybody out there knows, I was a backer and plan on reading it when I have a physical copy in my hand. Uh, as I heard you talk about it over the time and discussing with you behind the scenes a little bit, I was like, I see a lot of people get mad about this one, and and I guarantee you 99% of it's going to be people who will never read the book too.
Yeah, more than likely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, and to be honest with you, I don't know. I feel like anybody that meets me knows I'm a pretty like well-natured and fairly thoughtful person. So it's,
Mhm.
these stories never come from a place of wanting to attack anybody else, but like I want to ask complicated questions. I feel like I mean, that to me, that is like the major driving force of making great stories and making great art is like posing a real question, and maybe you develop some type of answer for yourself. But it's about the exploration of that
Yeah.
above all. Like, I mean, we get into some pretty big topics. Like there's in issue 1, we deal with some domestic violence. That's the first thing that this character has to go and fix uh, in his debut as a superhero. And we come back to that for the rest of the series as a sort of subplot element, and it will hopefully prompt some kind of difficult questions, and They're questions that I don't have the answer to, but I think that they're worth talking about, because we live in a society right now that is so easy to galvanize um, and into they're easy to galvanize into like a brutalist mentality with very little information, and that makes me a little sad. Like, I mean, part of that conceit is also what led me to write Minutes to Midnight, right? This whole book about perspective, because I felt like there was a general lack of it in the world. But yeah, I mean, like, we're going to ask complicated questions, and I'm not here to point fingers. I'm not here to justify, and I'm not here to condemn. I'm just here to present the query, through the lens of this story.
Yeah, and that's the point of fiction. Is to ask questions. They don't all have to be complicated questions. Like, some of it could be goofy, like, what if Godzilla attacks New York City instead of Tokyo? Like, but at the same time, when you think back to your favorite stuff, when you really dig deep into it, I think most people, when they're honest with themselves, it's because it did something deeper than that. As much as we like the popcorn stuff, like, there's always deeper meanings. Some of these movies and comics and everything we consume. And kind of a tangent, but that's why I get mad at people who are like, no politics in my comics. I'm like, but you do want it. You just don't agree with the one that. But anyways, I also think it's important for people to go outside that comfort zone. Like, some of the stuff, some of my favorite stuff is when the question's asked at the end of the day, I look at it and I was like, I don't agree with the answer, but that was a fucking awesome ride.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. And to get a little bit away from that, one of the things I mentioned it every time we talk, but whenever you put out a book, the first thing, and it's the first thing for any comic, to be honest, but I notice on your books is always the art. And you always have top-notch artists you're working with, which is always great. So I'd love to talk a little bit about the art, both interior and some of the covers you got. But let's start with interior art. Talk about the artists you're working with here.
Yeah. So Ryan Best is just like one of the most unsung talents in independent comics. I mean, he's an amazing guy. Like, he's somebody that I've come to call a friend. And when it comes to his abilities, man, he's so good at capturing the iconicity of like your traditional superhero comic while imbuing it with a greater degree of emotionality and expression. Like, he's a great character actor, and he's so good with camera and finding the right way to shoot these moments, because every panel is an opportunity to make somebody sit in time forever, or move them along. And he's got such a great instinct for that. He's just been an amazing collaborator, and we got to kind of, it's funny, like, we'd talked about working together for almost a year before we started working on this. And the testing ground was actually the last story in Minutes to Midnight, Bear Market Businessman, where he colored himself. And ironically, our letterer for Rise came from that story as well. But he's just so good at capturing emotionality in these 2D figures. And while they're not realistically rendered, they feel real, right? Their emotional states feel honest. And that is major for me, because, again, more than anything, this book does have the cool superheroism, but it's about this man. It's about the relationships that he forms and how they affect him psychologically. So Ryan is just amazing. He also does the A covers for the books. And for issue 2, he did a beautiful wraparound cover, which is going to be our D variant that I'm just so stoked for people to take a look at. But yeah, he's a fantastic talent and does not get enough love. And I think that this is going to be the thing that people start raising their eyebrows for, because he's incredible.
Yeah, it's funny when I started seeing his work initially, especially I think it comes from his panel layout mostly. But are you familiar with another independent creator, Benjamin Morris?
Yes. Yeah.
Reminds me a lot of his stuff. Like, they have very similar sensibilities in how they lay out panels and where it is. I don't think the art style is particularly the same, but like just how they the book flows, and from panel to panel, from page to page, seems to be very similar in nature.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, he's so good at what he does, and he focuses above all on the storytelling. You know, I mean, the guy can draw a bang up page, but when it comes down to all of the components that it takes to tell a story in this sequential format, and he's got it. But as far as the rest of the team goes, Fabi Marquez on colors, who just brings such a level of tone and atmosphere to this book. Like, she captures, I think, the like everything that you love about a superhero book while making it more contemporary, using lighting effects and different approaches to palette to really create not only contrast but feeling, and that's been major for this book. Just everything is so well executed, and she just helps to really capture the life that Ryan is putting on the page and amplify it. Like, she's I mean, just one of the most talented people I've worked with in my entire career.
100%. Just going through her past work, like, you could tell it's a lot of stuff that I've read, and I mean, this is a lot. Just, it's funny when you get these creators who you've read a lot of their stuff, but you don't necessarily know their name, and that's, we talk a lot about writers and artists in this industry, and I would say colorists and letterers just get no love, and that's because they do their job. We don't notice them.
No, she's incredible. Like, just the way she's able to emphasize key moments in the story and find the right way to focus that with the colors and with the lighting effects is just, it's such a crucial part of the storytelling, and it creates such an impact on the page, whether it is dynamic or sort of soft and emotional. And being able to strike that balance was super key for this book. Like, she was such a major part at establishing the visual identity of this book. And I'm just very grateful. And speaking of like visual identity, like Matthias, the letterer, was also he was the perfect packaging to put this toy in. Like, he knows exactly how to format all of it. He's been working with my buddy Tim Fling for I think a few years now, and he's just got such an appreciation and love for his craft that shows in what he does. Like, not only in the design elements, right? Like, his sound effects are cool, the caption box designs are cool, but in the way that he understands the flow of the page and how to help draw the eye in tandem with the layout and the composition of the page. He's an absolute whiz, man. I think he's gonna be one of the names in lettering in the next couple of years. I firmly believe that, not only because he's great at what he does and he's constantly getting better, but because he's also just one of the nicest people I've ever met. So yeah, just major shout out to him as well. I mean, this book, like, we've got such a great team, and it's funny. I think I was texting Fabi maybe a month ago, and I was like, I've never shied away from being confident about what I do and how I do it. But I genuinely think that I am the weakest link on this creative team, and these guys really do help to put it all together.
and that's, I feel, maybe I'm wrong here. I've only created a few things in the comics world in my life, but like, I feel like that's what you want. Like, I want to feel like the weak link.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it just makes me want to be better. I always try to link up with artists and talent who I think are better than me, because it makes me raise the stakes for myself, and I think I end up performing better. I think, throughout Minutes to Midnight, I mean, some of those artists that I work with are just like globally excellent talent, and my writing had to get better for it because I knew what I was working with, and I knew I had to show them off, right? Like, that's kind of the point, is like, you work with a great talent, you want to show off their ability, because at the end of the day, that's going to leave some of the biggest impact upon a reader. And so Yeah, I mean, these guys are incredible, and they make me want to be better, and I think they make me better. And now that we're about halfway through, actually more than halfway through issue 2 right now, um, I feel like I've gotten better, and I've gotten a better understanding of this story and where it's going, and um, how we want to approach it, and that's because of them.
Yeah, that's why it's funny to me after the 90s in this industry, like we had the 90s boom when like everybody was talking to artists. And you would think that in comics, artists would be the people to talk about um because they are so face forward. Like the story kind of exists and it's important, but this is a visual medium where the art really makes it flow. So it's interesting to me that like we don't put more emphasis on the artists and the work they do and make them more of a celebrity than they are.
Yeah, I mean, I feel very strongly about making sure everybody gets their proper due and their credit, and is shown the gratitude that they deserve for contributing in the way that they do. Like I always say, if my name is on the front of a book or on the spine of a book, so is my entire team. You know what I mean? From me
As they
to
should be.
the inker to the colorist to the letterer, because I don't make this without them. And it certainly would not look nearly as good without them. So yeah, I think that's just super important, man. Like the osmotic and sort of symbiotic nature of making comics is a really special piece of machinery in many ways. Like it sometimes makes it more difficult, yes.
Mhm.
But when you click with the right people, you make magic. And I feel like that's something that we are on the way to doing with the first couple issues of Rise, to be honest.
How long do you see Rise going on for? Is it set to be a 5-issue mini or?
So these are longer issues. So like issue 1 was 40 pages, and they're all going to be kind of in that ballpark, like mid 30s into 40 pages. Maybe the last issue might be a little bit more because last issue. But I'm looking at maybe 4 or 5 of these oversized guys. So it'll total probably between like 170 and 200 pages once we wrap. So yeah, theoretically, this could end up being like the longest thing I've done so far.
So traditional comics, 7-8 issues roughly.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say so. I guess that would be maybe. I mean, if you look at traditional comics now, it's actually more like 10 issues because they're like 20 pages with ads and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I say it's 2022 issues or pages an issue.
Yeah, so around there, probably around 8 or 9 issues worth of material put into like 4 or 5.
Very cool. Yeah. And that's important too because I've been talking more and more about we see the price of things going up in comics and especially in Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that with your book, we're not just getting a 22-page issue for I forget what you're charging for. Is it 15? 10? Oh, 10?
Yeah, so
Holy shit.
we do $10 early bird. So if you back in the first like 48 hours, or like $12 after. But I feel like that's still about what you're paying for a 22-page book on Kickstarter. And also the first issue has 2 fold out triplet page spreads that like I have not transferred the extra cost of producing that onto the consumer, to my own detriment. I've done something like this in every book I've ever made because I want people to read it. I care about this stuff. And I think we're making something cool and different that says something that ought to be said in our medium and in our space. And I want to make sure that people can do that without breaking the bank. Now I need to make money. I got to pay my team. But yeah, I'm a big proponent of that. And so as much as I can, I want to make sure that my books are economical and quality. And the hope there is that enough people recognize that and support it and tell someone else so that we have the volume of readership to make that sustainable. Because at the end of the day, that is the goal.
Yeah, which is what we need. And it's funny you say that that's probably the price of a 22. I'm seeing closer to 15, 16 an issue for 22 pages, which I understand the economics behind it, everybody. I get it. Just as a consumer, it does not sit well.
It's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow. That is for sure. And I say that as a creator. Like I've backed, I mean, I'm not, necessarily like one of those guys that's backed like hundreds of campaigns, but I've produced 8 books and I've backed over 80 something campaigns, so proportionally I've bought a lot of Kickstarter comics, and some of them, like the value proposition is not necessarily there, even as someone who understands the economics of producing this stuff.
Yes.
Like I'm also a big proponent of like earning that price tag. You know what I mean? Like I'm still a nobody. Like I'm still relatively new to this whole thing. And for me to ask somebody to pay $15, $16, $20 for like their first entry level tier to get a physical product when I'm unproven, I don't think is fair to the consumer. And I also recognize that as somebody who is a fan of comics and has been buying comics for like a decade now, that like it's just not economical. And so if I can make it as economical as I possibly can and use this as an opportunity to say, listen, like I'm going to give you a professional product. I'm going to give you something different, and it's not going to read like a cheaper version of something you already have. Then I hope, maybe people will listen and give it a go and put me in a position where I don't have to raise the price ever. But even post COVID, I really didn't do it all that much. I think when I was first starting the Helix project, I was selling floppies for like $6, $5. Like, I want to make sure that people get the material and engage with it, because like at the end of the day, I'm expressing something that's really, really important to me, and like putting that out into the world is more significant than making a buck. If I've got to continue waiting tables and bartending for the next few years so that I can get this material out there and have people interact with something that's close to me, well, then that's what I got to do.
Yeah, definitely. And just for the record, Trevor, the reason I'm waiting for physical is that trifold. You teased that, and I was like, well, I got to read this in physical. So
I'm so stoked. I'm so stoked to see how that comes out. Like, I think, I've done this enough times where, like, admittedly, when a new book comes in, that excitement has worn off a little bit, but to have like a triple page fold out, and like with how cool those pages are, like, I mean, they're beautiful. Ryan and Fabi and Matthias understood the assignment with those pages, and I'm so excited to see them in physical form, man. Like, I feel like a kid. It's so funny because I was so reluctant to doing the whole superhero thing, but there are a couple like tenets to making this book that like make me almost childishly excited. One of them was when Matthias showed me the really simple like internal monologue design, right? Because like every cool superhero has a cool designed like internal monologue, so it's them speaking or thinking. That was like big. When I saw the costume designs, when I was working on that with Ryan, and I think this triple page spread is going to be another big moment when I get to just kind of be a little kid.
It's so funny. So I enjoy like the way I believe it was Identity Crisis that kind of brought that to our attention, the whole inner monologue and really connecting it to a character and everything. I've been reading old issues of like some old sci-fi books from Marvel, DC, and some of the other like smaller publishers from we're not talking like 30s or 40s book. I'm talking like 70s, 80s books. And dude, bring back the thought bubble, man. It's so good. Like, I know it's cheesy, but I love it. Probably doesn't fit in your book. I get it, but to any other creator out there, thought bubbles, man, they're great.
I mean, I like the internal monologue like design caption. I like the language of it, like, and I think too it speaks a little bit to my upbringing in comics, because I started really reading comics around the New 52 Batman, and so to have that, I think it was it Tom Napolitano. I don't want to like misname anybody, but like that Batman caption with like the little bat logo and the gray background with the black text, I always felt was so cool to me, and so I love that design language. It feels sleek, it feels iconic, and immediately who's talking.
it works better, and also the artists out there probably hate me for saying thought bubbles because it takes up less space over their art too. But
Yeah, that's fair too. I didn't even think about it in terms of that, but yeah, that's true.
But man, when Rom's sitting there pontificating, you see that thought bubble coming off his head. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. So yeah, we talked about your creative team. By the way, Fabi worked on Barbaric.
Yeah, she's murdering a Barbaric book right now. Like,
is she doing the Born in Blood book right now?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the one.
Oh, dude, one of, if not my favorite book on the market right now.
Oh, dude,
such a good book.
I'll let her know. I'm sure she'll take the compliment very kindly. But yeah, she's amazing. She's so versatile. She's like, I mean, the coloring style and something like Barbaric versus like what she did for Rise are so different from each other, but both so striking and both so effective at pushing the line art in the direction that it's already beginning to establish. She's great.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. And yeah, that book. But let's talk about yours a little bit more. So we've got so as you're listening to this, the campaign is live. You can pledge to it. And some of the things you can get on it, I think the thing we all get excited about the most, we're all comics fans, are comic covers. So we have your A cover. Listen, I'm an A cover kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
So this is done by Ryan Best.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to connect with the issue 1 and 3. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, it's going to be sort of triptych.
Yes, and I remember from issue 1, it's a very similar style. I like the simplicity of it personally.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think if you scroll up a little bit, that issue 1 cover is up there in a smaller form. There we go.
Right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's him with the eagle. I remember that now.
Yeah. So it was actually inspired by the design language of a Francis Manipul Superman one-shot during the Darkseid War. It's when like Superman is just like rendered in straight like black and white, and then it has like this baby blue sort of like geometry with like a red pink highlight, and then like these things like dragging him under. I really like that cover is stuck in my head. I think that was probably like year 1 or year 2 of me reading comics, and I was like, like what can we do with that? And Ryan and I ended up conceptualizing a series of covers that sort of, I mean, the first of which really homages that in a little bit more of an explicit way, but we came up with a series of covers that actually sort of play with some of that same design language, and we think it came out pretty cool, and we still got to be narrative about it. You know what I mean? Like there's actually a lot of storytelling that persists in these very simple but striking images, and that's always a really fundamentally important element to creating a cover for me. Is this is where the storytelling starts. And
this one right here.
Yeah, I think it was originally like a white background. This might have been like a second. I think that's the second printing. But yeah, this is roughly the cover.
Okay. Sorry, I had to go find it.
Oh, you're good, dude.
So yeah, and then we've got, continuing on, cover B, which is our background for our chat here, which is Steph C.
Yeah, she did the B cover for issue 1 as well, with like the sort of somewhat abstracted cape like rolling over and the shadow of a woman on top of him, sort of like capturing him. And so we kind of took that theme and went horror. I had a really, really specific idea for and it's so cool that she was able to capture like a similar theme but in 2 very different lights. And she loves horror. Like she's a horror master. And so I had like a really specific idea going into this one. Like this cover I've had baking in my head since I pitched the book to Ryan, actually back at Heroes Con last year. And I mean, she just took it to a different level. Like, and it's so cool. Like her style has so many like expressionistic elements that really animate certain key features. Like you have these women's hands that are kind of snake-like and serpentine, and like the expression on his face of like kind of euphoria over the water, and then underneath like exhaustion and like despair, and it's almost monstrous. Like I thought like she absolutely hit a home run with this one.
It almost feels like a Swamp Thing cover.
Yeah, it's
You know?
super horror centric.
Yeah. And cover C, which I love, man. I'm gonna apologize if I butchered this name, but Vincenzo Riccardi?
Vincenzo Riccardi, yeah.
Vincenzo Riccardi.
Yeah, man. He's just been killing it on the cover game for a bunch of like major indie pubs, Image, Boom, Dark Horse, IDW, some more independent stuff. I mean, he's so good. His style is so identifiable. And he, I think, is represented by another by the same group that another collaborator of mine is, like Seth Adams. I think they're both represented by Kirby's Comic Art. And so I was like, Seth, I think I'm gonna see if he wants to like wants to do something. It's like, you mind if I name drop you? He's like, yeah, sure. So I reached out and was like, hey, I have this book. Like, let me throw this at you. And how would you feel about doing a cover? And he was all in and was incredibly professional. Moved at a crazy fast pace and gave me something that I absolutely adore. Like, there's something about this, no matter, like, despite how different it is, that gives me like Green Lantern vibes, which I love, aside from the sort of psychedelic elements. But again, like, this captures a high degree of narrativity. There's so much storytelling going on in this one image, and it's striking and beautiful. And I can't wait to see this thing in print, man. It's going to be so cool.
I agree. It's a great image on its own, but it also feels like a panel. Like I can tell, like you just said, the storytelling in the image, like there's so much here that you can pull from and so much emotion and feeling you can pull from, while at the same time being this like amazing image that almost trips you out as you're looking at it. Like, I don't know how it's amazing if somebody can, like, I can draw really good stick figures, man. Like you'll love them when you see them. But other than that, I can't draw a damn thing. And to imagine this came out of somebody's hand and their mind, just, it's another level, man.
Yeah, he was amazing. He really knocked it out of the park with this one.
And we talked a little bit about the secret variant.
Yeah,
we're hoping to get through. Oh no, the next one's through Stretch Girls. So yeah, the secret variant by your interior artist.
It's a wraparound. Yeah, dude, that thing looks sick. It was so good that for a minute I thought about doing like a reprint special edition of #1 and putting it on that. I was like, financially, that makes absolutely no sense, but it's so beautiful, it's so striking, and it just like it takes so much of Ryan's influences artistically and puts it like smack dab on the page. I mean, he loves Art Nouveau. He loves like Adam Hughesy style stuff, and I don't even remember what the hell it was, man. I reached out to him and he loves Art Nouveau. I was like, how would you feel about doing another cover? He's like, yeah, I'd love to. And I was like, okay, well, how do you feel about doing Art Nouveau? Because like, you love that stuff. When he does commissions, he'll add these really beautiful Art Nouveau elements to like these fucking sick superhero pieces. And I was like, okay, like, let's do it. Like, let's just let Ryan get into his bag, and deliver. And I was like, how about we make it a big old wraparound? Like, just this big full image. He's like, cool. And he's like, what do you want? And I gave him like the bare minimum. I was like, dude, just cook. Like, and that thing is probably one of the coolest images to come out of this entire series so far.
Dude, that's a poster. Like it's a poster. And it's another one of those things where I look at it and I'm like, a million years, pen in hand. I don't know how I don't understand how that comes out of someone's hand. Because even like, you can look at your eyes are centered at the two characters on there. And you can look at that and see all these amazing things, including his cape, which is so stunningly detailed and just can't believe it.
Dude, there's a running joke between me and Ryan that he's like becoming the cape guy. Like you look at, I mean, honestly, you look at the capes in his A covers too. They're so soft and beautifully rendered. And like, actually, I've gotten to a point now where in the scripts, if I want to do cool cape stuff, I'll be like, I will straight up be like, Ryan, this is your time. Do the thing, and he'll just give me like the most majestic and powerful swishing cape movement on the face of the planet. So he's just, I think that's going to be his thing. Like you have like the Norm Brayfogle Batman cape,
Mhm.
and I think that he stands a chance of having like the Superman archetype cape as like one of his claims to fame because he's just killing it.
Yeah. And what amazes me about that image too is, like I said, you got that there, and he could have put that on a static background, and you and I would have been like, "This is awesome! I can't believe you made this." But no, he decided to meticulously make the entire city behind him as well.
Yeah, he's awesome,
Yeah.
man. He's so good, and I feel like one of the most exciting things about this book is that I've been telling this guy how good he is for 2 years now.
Mhm.
And I think he only half believes me. And every person I've shown this cover to before launch has been like, "Oh my god!" Like, and his interiors are the same way, man. Like, I cannot say enough good things about Ryan and what he is capable of and what he's already delivered. Like, he's like, I feel like his potential is just like to the moon.
Well, and here's me saying it, Ryan. If this didn't kill you, like, because if it killed you, please don't kill yourself doing this art. But I could see a lot of people wanting this as a variant cover moving forward.
Oh man,
Like,
it's such a cool piece. Like I had actually as like a little gift to him because he's just been so amazing and so generous with his time and energy. I was like, I'm gonna buy you a new convention banner, like a new retractable banner. It's like design it however you want it. I mean, ideally we use some Rise art, but design it how because and also like yes, there is a selfish element, but I also think he's doing his best work in Rise right now. And he basically he used that, but like redid some of the sort of geometrical assets to better fit the frame of the banner, and it's so beautiful. And I was like, oh man, like why aren't I getting a new banner designed by him too? Like what am I doing with myself? But yeah, that correlates exactly with that cover, man. He's awesome.
yeah, it's amazing. And then we have a stretch goal variant. So if we hit 10,000, which you did with the last campaign, so there's a very doable goal to set. We get this one from Ryan Shoemate.
Yeah, he does he's I found him online because he does a lot of really cool movie posters and a lot of genre stuff. A lot of which is like comic related, and come to find out that he's a fan of comics, and he was kind of like internet mutuals with Steph. Come to find out, Steph C, who did the B covers for 1 and 2. She drew the first story in Minutes to Midnight. And I loved that he was able to bridge this gap of like illustrative realism and like really, really use color to push sort of a vibe and an atmosphere forward. And when we were like conceptualizing this cover, we went through a couple different drafts and ended up settling on this. It's a little bit of a nod to Hercules and Zeus and that tumultuous relationship between father and son, what that says about masculinity, and the bull as a figure of his own masculinity. So, and there is a specific reference of like Hercules defeating the bull in like the town square, so on and so forth. So we got to do a lot of really cool things that point at some of the thematic elements of the book, but also it's just a cool, badass cover. And I think our last stretch goal or our last backer goal, I can't remember, is potentially to make that cover foil, which would look sick,
Yep, 300 backers.
Yeah, we'll make that cover foil. Tell me that wouldn't look like the sickest thing on the face of the planet.
That might get me to buy a second issue. It's funny. As soon as you said that he did like movie posters and stuff like that, it made perfect sense because it does look like a classic sci-fi movie poster, or even like a classic like fantasy sci-fi, like a Masters of the Universe or something. It pops off the page and just everything he has there, and I can see the foil, dude, going through all the lightning. Yeah, Yeah,
Yeah, dude.
that needs to
And
happen.
I think it's like our last stretch goal would be to add a spot gloss to that wraparound cover as well. So, just simply telling someone about the campaign, getting them in on it is a great way to get free upgrades for things that you've already paid for. Like there's no added cost onto the consumer. It's just me being thankful and showing gratitude and wanting to give people even cooler shit, if I'm honest. So yeah, I hope those covers were enough to get people excited, because I'll tell you what, when every single one of those pieces hit my inbox, I was like just over the moon about them.
I don't know how you couldn't be excited about those covers. They're great covers. And if that wasn't enough, like, is there other rewards, things people can get as part of the campaign?
Yeah, so I mean, for those of you who are hearing about Rise for the first time, you can obviously catch up on the book and get issue 1. There are some base bundles where you can get like larger packs of variant covers between 1 and 2 for a bit of a discount, or you can add on whichever you like individually in the add-on section. You can get a personal hand-drawn art commission from Ryan. Like, it's actually, there's a couple examples on the Kickstarter page, but he is so good and undervalues his work so much. Like I think he's worth at least 2 to 3 times what he's charging for these commissions, and they are stunning. And some of those commissions are examples of what he did for previous backers on the last campaign. Like there's an inked cable piece on there that is sitting upstairs that I desperately wish I did not have to fulfill in a Kickstarter package and could keep. But there are also options to get color, and he's been really generous with his time in being willing to do various sizes to make sure that people can afford whatever they can and go home with something dope.
Yeah, and for anyone out there, like, commissions, while artists do pretty good with them, they're a big deal. Like, it takes a lot to get those done. I know I hear a lot of. It's a little bit more difficult at a convention. I hear some horror stories about doing those than to do it at home, kind of taking your time, but still, like, that is a big deal. Well, real quick, do you have a heart out? Can we get a few more minutes out of you?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm here, man.
I want to talk about the first campaign a little bit, because I remember during the first campaign, I did the spotlight for my Substack, which I was just starting out at the time.
Mhm.
And you were doing this thing where if people recommended other people to join it through special links and everything,
Mhm.
you were doing like extra goodies to go along with it. How
Yep.
did that experiment go with the first issue?
I feel like that's like the most successful it's been, to be honest with you. I've tried to do that on Minutes and Rise 1, and they've never translated well, or at least if they have, like, people haven't told me. But yeah, we've definitely gotten a little bit of interest in people just being like, hey, like, check out this book. It's really solid. I'm backing it. I think you should too. I mean, I think it's worth doing, and it's also just a really direct way for me to, like, show gratitude for the people who are kind of my grassroots movement. They're talking about this book as if it deserves to be read, and as a creator, there's nothing more satisfying than that, and nothing I could possibly be more grateful for. So it's just me, like, rewarding people for maybe doing things that they might have done already. And yeah, it also, like, as a business person, it gives me a certain degree of, like, metrics and figuring out, like, what is actually translating to sales, because it's so hard to figure that out in general, but nevertheless on the internet, because it could be coming from a million different places. It could be coming from Google search, it could be coming from a YouTube interview or a podcast or an article or whatever, or a social media post. And so, it's another way for me as a creative to get an idea of, like, where my audience is coming from and how to best engage that. But yeah, largely it's just me saying, hey, like, I appreciate you for caring so much about this thing. Here's a gold star. And by gold star, I mean, you might get, like, a really cool foil cover of Area 51 issue 1, or a sketch card. Like, Ryan did a couple really cool sketch cards of the protagonist in Rise that are like 3 by 5 inches ish, And like that was one of the things we gave away for our referral program last issue. So you get a custom piece of art, because like he drew like 15 or 20 of these sketch cards. None of them look the same. Like they're all like, it's not like he just like chopped out a million of the same pose, same, you know, they're all different. And so you get a one of one, simply for letting somebody know that you think the book is cool.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool program to do. And the fact that you were like giving away like things that like we just talked about, that stretch goals for foil variants and all this stuff like that. As a creator and somebody who's financing all this, that stuff ain't cheap, people.
Yeah. It costs me more money. And the reality is like, when we hit those stretch goals, my profitability actually goes back a little bit, because we're upgrading the print expenses and the time, right? Like I do my own pre-press. So when you do specialty treatments on books like that, you actually have to play around with the formatting of the master print file, so that you are doing it in such a way that their printing machines recognize this as like, okay, this is going to be the segment that is embossed or spot glossed or foiled or whatever. So it is a lot, but like I said, I believe in showing gratitude for support. Like I'm a nobody making picture books with really talented people. And so if we get to a point where this book is seeing the light of day in grand fashion and more people are interested in it, then it's just me saying, hey, like, thanks for being you. Here's a really shiny comic book with cool features, you know? But yeah, I believe in giving back to my community whenever I can. And I think sometimes it's to my own detriment, but you know, I'm a reader first before I was a creator. So I understand like what that means and what that says to your audience when you do something like that.
Comics people love shiny things, man. Just love them. So we recently heard about, with Kickstarter, their new initiative to do their version of In Demand, if you know that from Indiegogo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not 100% sure how that's working, because I don't get the back end, because I'm not a creator. Is that something, if you're able to do it, do you think you're going to do it with this project and keep it going after the 30 days is over?
Yeah, I think it's worth trying. I think anything is worth trying. I mean, it's so little risk and like not particularly high reward, but there's some reward. So logistically, why not? I'm curious, because I do think that there is an important component I've come to realize over doing a couple of these, that like you have a set time frame, because it galvanizes people and impresses the importance upon getting in on it now. But you also have a fair amount of people that are like, oh man, I missed this. And while I don't necessarily think it's going to be some huge chunk of the campaign, I think at the scale that I'm at now, like that could be an extra $250 in the week or weeks after the campaign, which, you know, like that covers about 100 copies of the book, you know, because I print anywhere from like 2,200 to 3,000 copies of a book now. So, you know, my unit price is a little bit lower because of that, but you know, that's like 100 copies of a book right there. So why not? Because I don't think it'll disincentivize somebody. No, I'm interested. I'm curious to see what that's going to look like long term for the Kickstarter community, and if it does in fact alleviate some of the fear of missing out that I find important in doing what we do.
Yeah, I'm curious about that, because while I've been on both sides, while there's been projects I've heard about late, then I'm like, oh man, that sounds like a really cool book, but I wasn't there for the 30 days. Damn. Maybe I'll catch the second issue, which can galvanize me to really pay attention to the second issue, to be honest. But at the same time, I wonder how many people are going to be like, well, let's wait to see if it funds first.
Yeah, you do see that a lot. And sometimes it's also like, I mean, a big means of garnering support is if like you're really close to funding and you have very little time. That's like when people step up and will either back or increase their pledge, you know, to throw you a little bit of change. Like I think the model the models of like either raising your goal to hope the community gets behind you or lessening it so that the algorithm thinks you're overperforming and will promote you. I think that's an interesting battle. And I feel like both of those methods have probably been effective at very different points in time, because in the small time that I've been doing the Kickstarter stuff, their algorithm and their wants and desires from us as a creator have changed so much that I feel like I never have an actual handle on it in the time that things are happening. But yeah, it's a really interesting feature, and I look forward to giving it a go. I think, the thing I would impress upon any of your listeners right now is that we have a lot of limited rewards that are either time sensitive or quantity sensitive, and they're probably going to be sold out after the campaign's over. Like, we have those art commissions in limited fashion. We've also got a couple of original pages, which we got to do for the first time on Rise 1, and 2 backers got to go home with the first couple pages of inks, which I think is a really cool reward. Like,
Yes.
in the 3 and some change years that I've been doing this, I have like only 3 pieces of original art have been made for anything that I have worked on. Anything. With and that's excluding Rise, so I should say pre-Rise. And I own all 3 of them, but like that's so like I've created over 300 pages worth of content in terms of sequential art, and then if you want to count all the covers, that's more. So it's like it's such a rare opportunity for me, and I think in the age where a lot of artists just work more efficiently on digital, I think that's a cool opportunity. And like outside of that, Ryan's really great, and you're gonna have a really cool piece of art on your wall, So I think I would very much impress the importance upon getting in on the ground floor if you can. And the beautiful thing is you won't be charged until the campaign's over anyway. So if you were going to wait, why not get in on it now? Claim your spot, claim the prizes and the rewards that you want to get in on, and know that you've got a little time to get it done.
Yeah, and I always tell people too, like that first week of a campaign, like you know this, but people out there may or may not. The first week of a campaign is like one of the most crucial. Get in there, get your backing in, and because we know how the ebbs and flows of a Kickstarter campaign is. Traditionally, it's just a U. It dives, and then at the end, it goes back up.
Mm-hmm.
So that first week, getting in there and getting it in the algorithm and trying to get it funded as soon as possible. Like, you're right. I've seen the books that are like $500 to fund, and then they brag that they got funded in 40 minutes or whatever.
Right.
Like, we get it, guy. But for anyone out there, that really is important, because if you can get that book funded in the first like week, couple days to a week, it's huge for its visibility on the platform. And as somebody who looks at this platform every week, multiple times a week, trust me, there's books. I've known people working here in this industry for a while now, and they have books out, and I had no clue because it's buried in the algorithm.
Yeah, it's major. And you know what? Like, some of us try to reward you for accommodating that request, on our behalf. Like I said, like I give early bird discounts. Like, if you back in the first 48 hours, you're going to get a book for 20% off.
Yeah.
And I apply that to variant covers. I apply that to bundles. You want all 4 variant covers, you save a little bit of money going that route. So yeah, I mean, it is so crucial in telling the algorithm that this is something that's worth the resource of promoting, because they have such limited space and there are more and more people on the platform. So it's just more competition for eyes. So yeah, for anybody listening, I hope you consider backing it soon after listening to this interview, because it does us a lot of favors, and you won't be having any money pulled from your pocket for about 30 days after. So it's very little risk, and it does a lot for us. And also, all of us Kickstarter creators are neurotic and constantly checking the page to see if anything moves. So you save my heart from like plummeting out of my chest by doing that as well.
That being said, also don't be the guy that pledges 2,000 and then brings it back at the last second, because I've seen what that does to creators' hearts too.
That's rough. I think part of it is like there are bots now. Like a lot of like bots will pledge crazy money and then back out. But I'll tell you what, I had for Helix Project 6, we had hit like 13K, and early on the morning of the last day, somebody who claimed the spot to get drawn into the book backed out, and the campaign dropped by over $600 on the last day. And I was just like, I think it was like 4 or 5 in the morning, and I had like checked my phone and was just like destroyed because I had also already paid to have my artist at the time, Sam, draw his likeness into the book. Like, again, that page was already fully drawn, so I had to pay him to go back and add the likeness. And that happened, and I was just like so heartbroken and felt so defeated. And it says a lot, I guess, about like how negativity will impact somebody, because that's still my most successful Kickstarter campaign of all time.
Mm-hmm.
But despite that, I just was an emotional mess. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a few Discords with different people, and I've while campaigns are going on, you can see the emotions of people when like that stuff happens, and I'm just like, yeah, I get it. Trust me, I get it. It's a lot, but it's don't be that guy or gal out there. Just back where you're gonna get the cover you want to get, a couple covers you want to get, original art, whatever. So, Trevor, it's actually amazing. We didn't dive too deeply into outside conversations, but that's amazing because we just talked over an hour just about Rise. And considering it can be tough to get people to talk 20 minutes about their book, kudos to you. But you've been very generous with your time, so I'm not going to take any more, but we're definitely going to have you back in the near future so we can get into some more nitty-gritty conversations while still promoting whatever the next project is.
Yeah, for sure, man. I'd love to kind of see if I actually deliver on all the things I said I would on Rise. And also like talk a little bit about Minutes, man, because I'm super proud of how that book came out and those stories. Like I think that I mean, there seems to be a consensus that one of those stories is the best thing I've ever done, and I'm proud of that whole thing. But man, it's been a pleasure, and I wouldn't have been able to just ramble for an hour if you didn't make it so easy, dude. So it's just as much about you as it is me.
Well, thank you. And people can get Minutes on this campaign as well, correct?
Yeah, so it'll be in the add-on menu. So what's really cool is Minutes was, because I got to do 4 different stories with different artists and different creative teams, a lot of my first collaborations with people who are associated with Rise were in that book. My first work with Steph, who does those B covers, was on the interiors of the first page of the first story of that book. My first book with Ryan, my first book with Matthias, who's a letterer. And we have somebody else coming to help us on colors for Rise 2 and 3. Raymond Lee colored Time Fleeting War Immortal, which is one of the stories in there. So you get to see how a lot of us first started clicking together, and then you can compare that to sort of what we're doing now, which I think is interesting because they're very different stories, very different art styles, all around the sort of just all around, all about. So yeah, I hope you'd consider checking that out if you think anything I've said is worth listening to. And we're very proud of that book, of Rise. And I think at bare minimum, the one thing I will agree with Chris on is that I'm working with some amazing artists. Like, they are so good, and they lift these stories up to an entirely different level. And so even if you're like, hey, this guy, fuck him, there are some amazing people who are a part of this book and who slaved over their lead and their Apple pencils and like late night stark white computer screens. So if not for me, I hope you'd consider checking it out for them and their contributions. But yeah, very excited for everything that's coming up.
So my recommendation out there to everybody is to back Rise and to add on Minutes to Midnight to your add-ons, because it's a really great anthology book. 4 stories, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, 4 stories, 64 pages, and it's perfect bound. So it's like a trade paperback.
Yeah, it's a great issue. So like I said, Trevor, I've been super generous with your time. Before you take off, though, can we send people to follow you somewhere? Are you on X, Kara, whatever social media network we're using these days?
Yeah, so I have So I'm on X or Twitter or Twix, as another media friend likes to call it, at PWatchPress. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Pocket Watch Press. I think I'm on Blue Sky. I opened an account like months ago and never use it. I think it's TFL Rights or TFL_rights. I'm not sure, but you can also find me on Threads at TFL_rights and Pocket Watch Press. But if you happen to find me on any social media, there's always a link tree to everything else, including the Kickstarter, which I hope you consider checking out. Even backing at a digital level is a big support for us. And my digitals are dirt cheap. I think you can get my entire creative catalog on this campaign digitally for $25. So it's like 300 pages worth of stuff with a bunch of behind the scenes material. So dirt cheap. And thank you. Thank you to everybody listening. Thank you to Chris for having me and for giving me the space to talk about all these things that don't exist. It's a privilege always. And I'm grateful to be here.
And to all of you out there who are listening and are watching, you know the drill. Check out those show notes. I'll have a link to the Kickstarter and to the link tree so you can find Trevor and all the different places he's at. So make sure to click on those and check out the project. Trevor, thanks again, man, for stopping by. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
The pleasure's all mine, man. Thanks for having me.